It'd be hard not to start off by reflecting on how challenging of a year 2020 has been. As an education researcher, my colleagues and I have talked about what we've experienced as a triple crisis, made up of COVID-19 that has infected millions and took the lives of over 200,000 people in the United States and over 1 million globally. The pandemic has also presented the education system with challenges it's not equipped to respond to. The triple crisis is also made up of an economic recession where it's estimated state education budgets could be cut by as much as 25% in the upcoming fiscal 2021 school year. All while education expenses are on the rise as schools deal with restructuring to offer more remote options and ensuring students are safe when they attend facilities in person. The triple crisis is also underscored by enduring calls for racial justice in the wake of the unjust murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and tragically numerous others at the hands of law enforcement. For some, this part of the triple crisis is a racial reckoning where they are finally willing to confront and take action about the unequal treatment of people of color. For others, it's brought renewed and heightened attention to the never-ending fight to dismantle white supremacy. These are troubling times. Collectively, as a society, we've also experienced incredible human loss. In sports, we lost Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi. We lost the great John Thompson, the legendary Georgetown basketball coach. In entertainment, we lost Chadwick Boseman, the Black Panther. In the struggle for equality and civil rights, we lost icons who dedicated their lives to making this world a better place for us all. Giants like John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, Katherine Johnson, and most recently, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. These are truly profound losses of human ability and spirit that have touched us all collectively. But more than that, these losses have also mounted in our personal lives. I was talking to a colleague and friend that operates a youth program. He had recently lost his brother. He mentioned everyone he knew had lost somebody close to him this year. And this resonated with me because I had the same feeling. Myself, I think of 2 childhood friends who we lost this year, and it was deeply felt by our community. And with so much collective individual loss, it's easy to get caught on how you and those closest to you have been impacted. However, how everybody has shared in this collective sense of loss, the brunt of the triple crisis hasn't been felt by everybody equally. Black Americans, who are more likely to work frontline jobs and often lack access to health care, are being hospitalized and are dying due to COVID-19 at a rate more than double their white counterparts. The budget cuts in education will ultimately be felt by students of color who already more frequently attend schools with inadequate funding. While we are all sharing in these hard times, there is an unequal distribution of struggle. And when I think about this unequal distribution of struggle, it reminds me of a huge truth and how my class privilege was a major factor in my educational and life outcomes. I grew up in a middle-class family in Hartford, Connecticut, which used to be known as the insurance capital of the world. Hartford is one of the oldest cities in the United States and was one time one of the richest. Today, 3 out of every 10 families live below the poverty line, while wealthy neighborhoods prosper. It's also a place of incredible inequality, where a few blocks separate affluence from just making it. Growing up, I saw stark disparities of the privilege amongst my classmates and friends. I was privileged to grow up in a family that had a college-going history. Both of my parents graduated from college, as is my uncle, my aunt, and most of my cousins. This provided me valuable navigational capital that I used to get through college myself. I was privileged to have two parents who earned incomes as insurance executives. That provided me material resources and social capital I could leverage to surface and pursue my ambitions. But living in a city with a lot of poverty, I had friends that didn't have parents and came through the foster system. As teenagers, they worked full-time jobs and cooked dinner for themselves, in addition to going to school. When I think about them, regardless of our ultimate outcomes, could I ever say it's because I worked harder than them? I was privileged to be able to focus on my development and not my survival. Oftentimes, it's hard to share and acknowledge our privileges in our stories. People with privilege often frame ourselves as heroes in our personal narratives and focus on the obstacles we've conquered. What I like to call struggle narratives have currency. Everybody's inspired by stories about resilience. Unfortunately, our love of struggle narratives get taken up in our policies. Struggle narratives are the basis for no-excuse schooling mentalities. They are the rationale that led to the incoherence of having white teachers from affluent backgrounds teach low-income students of color they need to have more grit. Since everyone is supposed to be a hero that overcomes in their own struggle narrative, we ask, what do these students need to overcome obstacles? What we should be asking is, what obstacles do they have that I didn't? And how do I remove them? One of the reasons we aren't asking the right questions and are not coming up with effective solutions is because the communities we serve often don't have a meaningful seat at the table. As we re-envision schools in response to the triple crisis, the communities that have felt the impacts the hardest must be recast as engineers and design partners for a new system. When communities are at the table, you get student-led schools like Empower Community High School in Aurora, Colorado, where students and teachers are remixing the curriculum to unleash the genius of students. You get counselors, not cops, in schools in school districts like Oakland, where they have reallocated $2.5 million from contracts with law enforcement to social service programs to address authentic community needs. When communities are at the table, attention is paid to the factors outside of school that impact young people's chances at success. So you get integrated services that account for students' mental and physical health, their post-secondary plans, that provide academic supports. When communities are at the table, you get community schools that reflect the hopes and ambitions of families and account for the realities of their lives. It makes me think about why persistent inequalities in education exist. An analogy I often explain it is, the inequities we see in education, the achievement gap, so to speak, is like having a stuffy nose. And education reforms are like blowing your nose. And we all know what happens. Your nose just gets stuffy again. Just like how in education reforms, the gaps in outcomes remain persistent. It's because just like blowing your nose, you're treating a symptom. Blowing your nose doesn't do anything to treat the underlying virus. And disparities in educational outcomes are a symptom of a larger virus of inequities that surround students' lives in affordable housing, in transportation, in healthcare, employment, and other social factors. As I work in education, I realize the experience of the people making decisions often do not reflect the experiences of those impacted by them. This is seen in the response to the pandemic. The federal government is demanding schools must be in person or lose funding, or international students must be on campus or be deported. It's reflected in the attacks on the 1619 Project, which reflects the histories of so many of our students. The decision makers, largely white, often wealthy, are totally disconnected from students, teachers, and families who are often subjected to these cruel and ineffective policies. Let's be honest. Inequities in schooling based on race and class have always been there. Suffering has always been unequally distributed, nationally and globally. This pandemic gives us the opportunity to acknowledge the impact of inequity and use that as an awareness as a tool for change. If the people making decisions say, well, it's always been like that, or we should continue in the same way, we can say no more. The pandemic is not something that can be triumphed over. It's not a struggle narrative with a conquering hero, but rather an opportunity to shine a light on what has always been an unequal distribution of struggle and say no more. Thank you.